Hi everyone, so I've been baking sourdough for about a month now, so I am officially a lockdown sourdough baker, so by no means an expert, and I thought for that exact reason it was a good idea to put together a video to show how easy it is. If I can do it, anyone can do it. So what's the first thing you do? I have my sourdough starter just there, all ready to go. So what I'm now doing is checking that it's actually ready. So checking it is actually live. So pop that open and you can see it's actually really nice and bubbly. You can see the bubbles on the outside and it's nice and rounded and it's got a great smell to it. I'm going to take a tablespoon of it and just pop it in some water, and as you can see there, it is floating. As it's floating, it means it is ready to go. So for this recipe I use 375 grams of flour straight into the bowl, and you can use plain flour. At the moment I'm using just a strong white flour. This one's from Waitrose, but I have one from Sainsbury's as well, and plain flour is fine. And to that you add 247 mils of water, and you just add that straight in, and then just use a normal spoon to just stir them together. Just the water and the flour. And what you're doing here is a process called Autolyse, and what you're creating is the water breaking down the flour and creating the gluten. So there's two molecules within the flour that are then broken down and creating with the water the gluten, and this is what will give you that air in your dough. So it just looks just like that. And that's it. What you're doing with this now is just putting a bit of clingfilm over it and letting it sit for about 45 minutes. See you in a bit. So we're back after 45 minutes and you can see the structure of the dough has changed. To this we're going to add 12 grams of salt straight in there. It's not going to interfere with the yeast. And then we're going to measure out 128 grams of starter. There we go. So now we just use our hands and combine all of this. Once it's all combined, it's going to look like a sticky mess and you're going to wonder what you're going to do with this. But as this is a no-knead method that we're following, what we do now is just finish combining all of that starter with our lovely flour. Make sure the salt is completely worked its way through as well. So you're left with a mixture that looks like something you can't really work well with, but it looks like this. A little bit sticky, very unmanageable. But what we're going to do now is we cover it again for 30 minutes and then we come back and use our stretch and pull technique, which I will show you in 30 minutes. See you later.
Teacher then will be back on the streets safely posting in the next couple of weeks. Teachers look out for our protest on our website, rebellion.org.
Donica, thank you. That's Donica McCarthy, who's an environmental campaigner with Extinction Rebellion.
Our preparations for the return of the Premier League are ramping up with confirmation earlier today of the first 3 full rounds of fixtures.
So what you're going to be doing now is using a stretch and pull technique to build some air into the dough. So this process you'll follow for 2 hours. So every 30 minutes you'll uncover it, and then the dough will feel less and less wet. So this is the 3rd time I'm doing it. So what you're doing is literally picking it up from the sides and folding it over with a stretch. So picking it up and folding it over like so. And what you'll find is, as this is the 3rd fold I'm doing, the dough is really smooth and it's become quite silky and less sticky, much more manageable. So what you're doing is you're folding it until it becomes a dough again, and then all you do is cover it up and then come back to it in 30 minutes, and you follow this process for 2 hours. So we're here for the final fold. So this is 2 hours and this is what the dough looks like. So we're doing a final fold. Oh, that's looking good. It's really silky now and it's not as sticky as it was before it went in. So I've tried to scrape as much as I can off the sides there and keep it nice and round. And you just cover it up again. And now what you're doing is putting this in the fridge overnight for the bulk rise. So we'll look at it again in the morning. So it's the next morning and we're looking at our dough straight from the fridge. You can see it's almost double and half the size. It's looking quite good. So all you're going to do at this stage is put a tiny dusting of flour on a surface so it doesn't stick, and tip your dough out onto it. Oh, that looks great. Look at it just there. It's nice and sticky still. There we go. So all you're doing is going to just give it a bit of a shape. Make sure you don't knock too much of the air out. Just roll it up into a ball. Look at that. It's looking good. Just give it a bit of a shape. And then cover it and let it rest for 30 minutes just on the bench. Just giving it a bench rest for 30 minutes. So in the meantime, what you're doing is you're going to prepare your proofing basket. Now normally you can buy one of those Valentine baskets that you can flour, but I don't own one. So what I'm using is my Pyrex dish with an ordinary tea towel. So I lay the tea towel into the base, well, the main casserole bit. Just make sure there aren't any creases. Where they are, they're just stretched out. And then you just flour inside. Now, my video is showing you just using ordinary tools that you would have in your kitchen without having to buy loads of things, but you can buy a powder shaker, which I don't own. So what I'm doing is just really generously flouring the inside of this tea towel, all at the edges, definitely in the base, to make sure it's fully covered with flour, because this is where the dough is going to sit for 3 hours for its final proof. So when you want to take it out again later, you've got to make sure it hasn't completely stuck to the tea towel. You'll find when I take it out later, it does stick a little bit, but there's a way of getting it off without. There we go. Nice and even all the way up to the edges, right the way down to the base. So after the 30-minute rest, you need to put a bit more flour down on the surface and then stretch your dough flat. And then fold it over. And then roll it, and then do it again. Stretch it flat. But make sure not to knock all the air out, because you'll see there's air bubbles in the dough where it's nicely risen. Then you just turn it over and then roll it so it becomes round in shape. The next thing you're doing is building tension in the dough. So you have to basically get your hands and pull the dough towards you, turn it 90 degrees, and then do it again. Keep doing it. And what it's doing is creating a nice firm surface, which is smooth, and you'll have a flat base as well. Cool. So there's still an element of stickiness to it, so just handle it with care, and then flatten the sides, and then just lift it up and put it into a tea towel. And then make sure there's enough flour on the sides so it doesn't stick, and then tuck it in. And cover it. And leave it like this for 3 hours at room temperature. So we're 3 hours later, and we're at the stage where the final proof is complete. So the best thing to do is unwrap your tea towel, and then check your dough. So the best way to check if your dough is proofed correctly is when you put your finger down on it and it springs back, it needs longer. If it leaves a dent when you push your finger in, it means it is actually overproofed. And if it leaves a small dent and rises back slowly, it means it's exactly right, which is where we are with this proof. So what we need now is some greaseproof paper and a cooking tray to cook it onto. So this is what I'll be baking on. So in order to get it out of here first, I use a chopping board. So I get the chopping board, put my greaseproof paper over it, and place it on top, and then spin it round and take off the tea towel. And of course, if you have a proofing basket, you don't need to worry about that. So then we're just going to transfer that onto the tray. Touch. And dust off any extra flour, because that will just burn. Now what you have to do, and this is quite a tricky element, which I haven't quite yet mastered, is to put a cut in the top of the dough. And what you're doing by doing this is creating space for the dough to cook and for it not to create the crust too quickly, and for the dough inside not to cook correctly. So I use a sharp blade. You can use a razor. I've tried every knife in the kitchen and had very little success. So this is not going to look perfect because I have not yet mastered this. So you just do a nice deep cut And the idea is to do it in one big stroke, but I've not, as I say, managed to do that. So that's one, and then I just do a secondary one here, just to give it a bit of a design. And it looks rather terrible in the true beginner style that I'm doing this in. Cool, so let's put that away. And then you get a stainless steel container. I just use a little mini wok and fill it 2/3 of water. And what you're doing is, first of all, if you had a bottle spray, you'd use a spray, but I just use my fingers and spray that dough with water. And then you put this inside the cooking tray, and this whole thing goes into the oven like this at 250 centigrade for 20 minutes. Midway through your bake, that's what it looks like right now. What you're doing is just removing that, but more importantly, you're turning it down from 250 to around 220 and putting your timer on again for a further 20 minutes. And just remove the water. And here we are, the bake is complete. So you can see I have a nice crusty, do it again, loaf with flour. My cut is not great. And then if I just show you the base, it's nice and brown as well. There we have it, a sourdough. So I've been told not to cut the bread as soon as it comes out the oven. It's not really good for it. The idea is let it cool, then get into it. So I'm about to show you what the crumb looks like. It's going to be a bit of a surprise for me as well, which is always every baker's delight. I wish I could tell you how lovely, well, I can tell you how lovely it smells, but that's the crumb. Those lovely air pockets is what you want to see. That's lovely. Oh, that's lovely. It's lovely and soft with a beautiful crust. I'm happy with that.